The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
I put a lot of effort into this opening joke because I wanted this episode to be the very best, like no episode ever was. Because preparing for this opening was my real test, and to see if I could get a chuckle out of you was my cause.
And you did. I mean, I naturally assumed that in order to do this, you traveled across the land, searching far and wide. But you wouldn't do that because that would be research. And we don't do research on this channel.
I was wondering how you were going to get out of singing the entire song, and that was good. That was very good.
I'm happy with what I've done today.
That was like an escape rope, one of those items I never used the entire game.
No. I think that just automatically gets you out of combat, right?
Teleport gets you out of combat. Escape rope gets you out of the dungeon.
No. Just muscle through or you pass out, one or the other.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about in mechanics. But we played... Okay, I want to make sure I say this right. We played Pokemon Red and Blue, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to do like this whole thing about how like we played different games, but yes.
Yeah. Well, but so this was actually challenging finding like the way the generations are defined, because Gen 1 is considered 2 games, right? And then Pokemon Yellow has like there's extra Pokemon from the other games, and you start with Pikachu and blah, blah, blah. And then like Gen 2 is 2 games, and they're all like that. So it's just kind of a weird like thing. Like, I don't think I've ever played another video game that was quite like that in terms of like, you don't really say which game you played unless you're talking about which Pokemon you need to trade. It's more like which generation were you playing?
Yeah, you talk about Gen 1, Gen 2, not, I played Pokemon Red. And it's like, okay, so you played Gen 1.
Yeah.
It's bizarre how, for whatever reason, we all decided that it was entirely cool for Pokemon for us to all have to get 2 games.
Or have friends.
And just, nope. And a link cable? Look, you can either have friends or a link cable. I think that having the link cable precludes you from having friends.
The implication there was almost that, like, you only have so much money, so you can either buy a link cable or you can buy friends.
I mean, how do you procure friends?
Who could afford both?
Shared interests and time? I don't think so. It's easier to buy them.
Yeah. We did play Gen 1. I played Pokemon Red because red's my favorite color, and that's the one that has the dragon on the box.
Ooh.
And you played Pokemon Blue, which if I recall correctly, was that the one you actually played as a kid?
Yes, I had Pokemon Blue as a kid, and yeah, I don't think I actually like my jam was Bulbasaur as a kid. So that's the one I picked again, because I was like nostalgia, right? But yeah, no, I definitely had Pokemon Blue as a kid because I was like, oh man, the red one has a dragon on it, but not the one I had.
Yeah. This game came out in America on September 29th of 1998, which is actually a long localization window. That makes me wonder, because it came out in 96 in Japan. That makes me wonder, like, they may not have been super gung-ho about like localizing it to the American market. But when we talk about nostalgia goggles for a game, we haven't played a ton of games like, Mario and Sonic, like some really popular games, but like, can you have been alive at this time in history and not know what this is? Like, I don't think you could have. It's like you can go to any, country on the other side of the planet and hold up in the 90s and like hold up a picture of like Mickey Mouse, and they're like, oh, that's Mickey Mouse. It's like, do you know anything else about him? And they're like, no, right? I feel like Pikachu is kind of getting there.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I do think that like for Pokemon, if you say something Pokemon, people say at a minimum you will get I have heard of that. That may be it. But you but you have heard of it, you know? like this is the Jack Sparrow of media. No, absolutely. But what is your, because you didn't play this before now, right?
Yeah. So, well, I'll start because mine's the way more complicated, stupid, nostalgia experience. So I didn't have a Game Boy when I was the age I would have been playing the Pokemon games.
You had a Game Gear, right?
I did.
Because it had Sonic on it.
Because it had Sonic on it. Yeah, mistakes were made, but we soldier on. So Brian had a Game Boy, and Brian was into Pokemon. So to me, Pokemon was a game my friend played, and then it exploded, and like it was everywhere, and everyone was doing it. But the thing is, at the time, right? Like in 1998, it was just a game I knew people who played it that I didn't play. Like it didn't seem like I am missing out on a cultural milestone. Like it just wasn't that big of a deal. There were lots of games that I didn't think were that important. It's kind of like now when people talk about like Counter-Strike Go and they're like, oh man, I've played like thousands of hours of Counter-Strike. I'm like, neat. I don't think I've ever played a single match, and it's fine. But like if I had known as a kid what it was going to become, I'm sure I would have like sold plasma to be able to buy a Game Boy, because it turned into this entire thing. So I didn't have a Game Boy, so I didn't play the video games. And then what also became popular was the card game. And from a very young age, I was already of the mind that I don't want to play something where I have to have more money than my opponent to have a chance of winning, because at that time, it was just like Magic the Gathering. It's like, who can buy the best cards? And I just had no interest in card collecting. And I certainly had no interest in playing a game where like the rich kid wins, or at least has like a better chance of winning. So I didn't get into video games because I didn't have a Game Boy. And then I didn't get into the card game because of the money thing. And then like, I just continued to let Pokemon stuff just wash past me for the next 20 years. So when people were like, oh, the new generation is out, I was like, neat, I hope you enjoy it. And they're like, oh, there's like this is like the earlier gens but like modernized. Neat, I hope you enjoy it. But like, I just, because I never got into handheld consoles, like they just continued to miss me because they were never on home consoles. They were always on handheld consoles. I actually didn't find out until I was playing this game and someone was talking about it in Twitch chat that the GameCube had an adapter to play Game Boy Advanced games the way the Super Nintendo had the Super Game Boy. And I was like, ooh, I had a GameCube. That would have been my chance. Because by the time the GameCube was out, I made my own money and I could have bought the adapter even if I didn't want to buy a Game Boy Advance. Like that was my second opportunity to like get sucked in, but I missed it. So I played Pokemon Yellow once as an adult. I bounced right off of it. I think I got like an hour into it and just bounced right off of it. Just zero interest. And until now, actually played the game cover to cover. So that was my Pokemon life.
I was gonna say, and Sword and Shield is on the Switch, man.
That's true, right? And we'll get to what I think about that somewhere in the episode.
So for me, I was a zealot of Pokemon. I've forgotten when. It's one of those things where it just it was almost like a witch's curse, where like I don't remember buying it. I just remember having it at one point and it somewhat consuming my life. So I could go on ad infinitum about playing it, and you can play it anywhere. Like that's the whole thing. But the one thing that I remember distinctly was I just moved to Florida and I was on the junior varsity football team, right? Because I used to play football way back in the day. I played left bench. So I remember, I know, right? It's nice, cool. They don't make you wear all the pads. So I remember at one point though, standing next to somebody, and for whatever reason, we were just, because we were like waiting on our turn to do drills, and so we would sit there and talk, and then go drill, and then come back, and all we talked about was Pokemon. Like me and this other dude in JV football, all we did was talk about Pokemon for like a week. And then he said, hey, you should come out and hang out with me before school, like, where we can like talk about this sort of stuff. That was Brett, who introduced me to Frank, who introduced me to my entire circle of high school friends with whom I am still friends with today. So I kind of owe my social circle weirdly to football and Pokemon, which is just bizarre, right? Like that's a little weird, but
I
that's
feel
my
like most people have moments like that in their life, and it's just because life happens in moments. But to be able to so directly trace pretty much everyone you consider important to you to Pokemon is like, you can't buy marketing like that.
Yeah, no, it's we are all just a series of events, but it's like, this one was apparently kind of important, and again, like if taking that fourth dimensional omniscient point of view, right? If somebody said to me like, hey man, you really need to spend $40 on this game. Why? Well, it's a good game, but also because your entire future depends on it.
That's like every kid of that age, like that's what they actually imagine, right? Is future them coming back and they look all like Mad Max grizzled. And it's like, you have to keep playing video games because one day the aliens will invade and only you will be able to catch them all.
Yep. Yeah, it's like the 90s time travel. It's like, oh, snap.
Crap. Isn't that basically the entire, minus the time travel, but I think that's basically the entire plot of, oh crap. It's a movie with the kid who was in the Wonder Years. Right. And he's like really good at video games. And then they're like, this is a secret recruiting for like Space Invaders. It's so dumb.
I mean, it's also Ender's, the plot of Ender's Game, but
I mean,
I know the one that you're talking about. No, wait, it's I don't remember. Okay, so I don't remember the movie you're talking about. I do remember the Aqua Teen Hunger Force parody of that movie, which is where the Moonanites come from. Yes. Is that what you're talking about? That's what we're talking about, right?
Sure, yes. I mean, they are essentially the same plot, yeah.
So, chill?
Yeah, we got a show. So you would have known we were going to play this game if you checked out our cool website where our contact form is and where the list of games that we're playing next is. And if you look at the game we're playing next, it's super sad. So that's cool. Oh, I almost forgot. This is a listener request. So sometimes listeners request games, which you can do on Twitter and through the contact form on the website and stuff. And sometimes we play those games. Sometimes it's a game like Pokemon. So, it doesn't have to be some weird, like, esoteric gem no one's ever heard of. Like, you can ask for, games that were normal games. We're both on Twitter. I stream on Twitch. I streamed this entire game minus grinding. Like, I did some grinding off air, but I played the entire rest of the game on Twitch. So everyone can see that I did, in fact, beat my stupid rival's face into the dirt. It was awesome. So that was cool. If you want to help us out, you can leave ratings and reviews in Apple Podcasts. You can tell your friends to listen to the show. Or if you subscribe to if you patronize our Patreon, what is the verb there? If you patronize our Patreon. Yes, I like it. You get stuff like the after show. The after show for the Doom 2016 episode is basically just 40 more minutes of us talking about Doom. So, it's more stuff for as little as $1 a month. If you support us at the 8-bit classic or 16-bit hero level, we will shout you out on the show. And so our 8-bit classics we want to thank are Kevin,
Keeper of the Charmander,
John,
Wielder of the Bulbasaur,
Yarno,
Holder of the Squirtle,
and new patron, Jason.
Fire of Onyx.
And our 16-bit heroes, Jacob,
who has harnessed the power of the Mewtwo.
David
has captured the elusive Mew.
And Michael,
the trainer of Dr. Oak on how to actually research Pokemon. Because that Pokedex is empty when you get it, and it's his life's work.
That's true. Maybe he meant like the actual physical Pokedex was his life's work.
No. Actually, this is a real quick tangent and aside, real fast, but like it'll come back, which is they did an experiment. I'm gonna screw it up in paraphrasing it, but basically, what they did was they put a clock on at a very very high altitude, right, like an atomic clock, right, and then an atomic clock at sea level, and after like 80 years, or something like that, they looked at the time, and the times were like a very small amount off, showing that time had dilated because you're moving faster at a high altitude on Earth than you are at a lower altitude on Earth. And I told that to my wife, and she looked at me like her face was like blank with horror when I said that. And I said, "What?" And she's like, "They wasted their lives." And I said, "Well, they did other stuff. Like they didn't just sit there and just
two guys, one at the mountaintop,
yeah,
one at sea level, just watching the clocks,
just minding the clock, right?" And she said, "No, waste of time," and just like moved on. So I feel like that's Dr. Oak, right? Where it's like, this is your entire life's work. Well, it was making the Pokedex, but I feel like you will have a journey. Like, you have wasted your life, old man. Smell you later.
I could have just bought a notebook at the Pokemart.
I mean, I ran into 3 Pokemon on my way here. How do you not have at least 3 Pokemon in here?
There are Pokemon in this room with us right now.
When I throw this out of the window in rage, it'll hit a Pokemon. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, he's such a prick. I kind of prefer the headcanon that he completely wasted his life. And I just want to say this up front. If you, because I know you, and I know you like to indulge in what if everything was terrible headcanon.
I do.
About 5 minutes into Pokemon, I literally said out loud, like, man, you really just got to take this for what it is, because it's completely absurd. There's no applying logic to it. Nothing makes sense. Their economy wouldn't function. The world has absolutely no rhyme or reason. Like, and you just gotta kind of be okay with that. And I'm not saying it isn't fun to like make the dog fighting jokes, because it's such low hanging fruit. The fruit will rot on the ground and go to waste if you don't pick it sometimes. But this game wears its, hey, I know that I'm a video game, like, pretty proudly, which makes it like feel a little more like punching down to mock it. Because it's like, we know this is ridiculous. Look at this thing. This one's just a pile of garbage. Like, so that I kind of appreciate that, like, when the door into the theater says, like, please suspend your disbelief now or you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah. It's like in Steven Universe where they go to Ronaldo's like scary spooky evening fest, and Ronaldo shows up all like spooky out, and Lars starts laughing at him. I'm like, kick him out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's not here for the right thing.
Yeah, he doesn't belong here. He's making fun of you. Like, this is all camp. It's the reason why we're here. Visuals?
There are visuals in this game, and I'm pretty sure you played like the actual like gray Game Boy version, right?
Yes, I did.
Which I think is appropriate because you have a nostalgia experience for this game. I was not willing to tolerate that, so I played on a Super Game Boy. So I got it in glorious, sometimes up to several colors. And that really, because I played a little bit on a regular Game Boy just to see the grays, but man, like, I really like the Game Boy art style, but just that little touch of color really makes everything pop and just feel a little bit more alive. So I will try to separate those two things into saying, like, I really like the art style in this game. I think it's really cute and really clear, surprisingly, like what is happening and what this thing's supposed to be and what that's supposed to be. But man, if you're gonna go back and play this, I'll tell you right now, try and play it on a Super Game Boy, because that color helps.
Oh yeah, no, because I watched a quick video because like I wanted to see where like one thing was, so I just queued up like a walkthrough, and that walkthrough was in color. I was like, this is just so much better, because again, I wanted to get the OG experience, so I did play it, on the good old black and white Game Boy. But man, it's the color does make a huge difference, absolutely. And I did, because I actually had Pokemon Blue and then Pokemon Yellow when it came out. I did get that one as well because I wanted Pikachu because I liked the show. And that one was on a Game Boy Color. So I could have made the argument for that, but I was like, no, let's bring back the original. Here's what blows my mind. And maybe you know more about the hardware constraints than I do. But like you said, like it's very clear, like everything, like who's doing what and all this sort of stuff. But you have a very limited, they're pixels, right? You know, they don't have a huge canvas. There are 151 different pictures, right? Because there are 151 different Pokemon. More importantly, is that there's 302 different pictures because each Pokemon has a front and a back. And that I thought was like, that's when all of a sudden I noticed that that blew my mind, because I was like, it would have been so easy to have just put them both in the same frame, like in the same plane, and then it's always the front facing pictures, and it shows them kind of fighting each other that way. But that, I don't know, like now having played Pokemon forever, that wouldn't feel right. So instead, it's you're standing behind your Pokemon, their Pokemon is off in the distance, and they're way out of line of sight, right? And so the fact that every Pokemon has a front and a back, right? And there's like 20 different trainers, right? And all this, there's so many different pictures. I was like, how are you doing that? And the only way I can think about it is because despite the 302 Pokemon animations and the 50 different trainer pictures and all this sort of stuff, there's like 5 different types of terrain.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
The overworld is super like what do you call it? Homogeneous.
Yeah.
Just
there's
really
basically like
really homogeneous.
Yeah. There's basically, it's like there's fields, tall grass, rocks, cave.
Yeah.
And some other sprinklings in there, but that's it, you know? So I think that's where they got the memory for, because they were like, look, man, you guys have like 20 different total tiles to work with to populate the overworld. Outside of that, we're just pouring it into Pokemon. It's Pokemon all the way down. What's the name of it? I feel like every time somebody said, hey, can I get like 3 more assets for the terrain? I'm sorry. What's the name of this game? Is it Terrain Finder? No. Pokemon. We're making more Pokemon. Give it to the Pokemon team.
Yeah, and so I can't speak to the exact storage of a Game Boy cartridge, but what I would assume they did from like an art direction standpoint is exactly what you just said, where they were like, okay, we can either design another Pokemon, or we can give all the Pokemon like a little attack animation. They don't do that. Everything is super static. So yes, they all have to be drawn from the front and the back, but it's because they don't have basically any animations. Like the entire sprite sometimes moves up and down or bobs side to side or whatever, but like, you know, no one ever swings their arm or clenches their jaws or anything. And that's, I think, in the exact same vein as what you're saying with how kind of homogenous and boring the overworld is they're like, well, if we animate like one attack animation for each Pokemon, and if that one attack animation is just 2 small frames, you've now tripled the amount of drawings we have to do, which is going to massively cut down on the amount of total Pokemon we can have, and we want a boatload. So
yeah,
I think that they optimized correctly on the visuals, like static visuals that are all super crisp and clear, and they all feel really unique and interesting. Some of them I think are dumb as hell, but you can always tell what you're looking at. Is it on my side where I have that Pokemon on the field, or is it on their side where they have that Pokemon on the field? Like everything looks actually really good. Kind of a tangent to this is some of the streamers that I watch, like as kind of like background, like cleaning the house sort of noise. They play some of the newer Pokemon games, and this is related to you were saying like, oh, Sword and Shield, they're on the Switch. The new Pokemon games, they look great, except that they look exactly like Gen 1 Pokemon, and that sort of makes me angry in a way I can't quite explain. So when you play this and you use surf or fly or dig, like basically your sprite just moves a little bit, right? Like maybe it goes up or down, or maybe it flashes for a second, so it's supposed to be like they moved or whatever. In the newer Pokemon games, and this is on current hardware, right? The Switch is pretty damn recent. When you use a move, that's basically how much these sprites move. And that really irritates me. Like in a way that I just can't totally explain, but it just feels lazy and shitty. And it's like they're trying to harken back, I think, to the way it felt in Gen 1. But here's the thing. The cute little Game Boy sprites that, you know, they're static assets and they just sort of like flash or you know, bob side to side or whatever a little bit, like that feels very Game Boy appropriate. So like when I was watching the Gen 1 animations and the many fights that you have to do to get all the way through this game, at no point did I say, these graphics suck. This is so boring and stupid. Like they don't even really animate the characters. Like that never crossed my mind. But then when you watch a new Pokemon game, you're like, this is it. This is what having like one of the biggest video game franchises in the world has gotten me, is high res, completely static assets that don't do anything. Like, why is that bird not actually sinking its talons into Pikachu's face? Like they're on opposite sides of the field. Anyway, it just really pisses me off. So all of that is to say, these graphics are super Game Boy graphics, but it's charming because it feels like you're looking at like an interpretation of the fight. It's not trying to be photorealistic.
Right. No, agreed. And that's interesting. We can discuss some more about the sword shield thing, because the energy attacks do actually like interact and make contact with the opponent, but you're right, the physical attacks don't. And I didn't really notice that.
It's because they don't want something that looks like a lion to take what looks like a chunk out of what looks like Pikachu's jugular. Like, I get it.
Well, that, but also too, is I think that saying like the way it looks for a Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and a Venusaur to take a ray gun to the face all looks about the same. To try to have a Pidgey attack an Ivysaur, a Bulbasaur, and a Venusaur would be wildly different. So like, you know, so I think that that's probably where it is. It's like if we've got 150, like they would have to do 150 different animations versus like I'm casting Ice Ray. That's one animation, not 150 would be my guess. But,
yeah.
But I didn't even think about that. Yeah, no, and to your point though, is I actually thought that they really did a good job of, to your point, like kind of letting your own imagination fill in the blanks, because honestly, I thought that the amount of variation that they had, even though it's very, very small and nuanced for each different attack, was pretty solid, again, given the constraints of the hardware. So, you know, yeah, when you press tackle, everybody's tackle is just kind of a little like they shift one pixel to the side and back because it's like they tackle them, right? But I mean, and you didn't get a Bulbasaur because you make terrible decisions. So, but Bulbasaur has like Leech Seed, which actually throws seeds out and then like little sprouts appear. And then there's Vine Whip, which is a lateral cut and then two little, you know, stars for that attack. And then there's Growl, which is a little note, right? But then Screech is a similar little note, but it's like a higher pitched audio cue, right? So between the audio and the visuals, they kind of make, if an attack has a different name, it is slightly different. You know, now Dig is just, it disappears, you know, because it dug underground, you know, so they're not necessarily wildly creative, you know, and some of them, there's absolutely some overlap, but I thought that the variation was enough that it didn't feel like when I'm using attack 1, attack 2, and attack 7, that it's all exactly the same animation, which was very common, you know, back in the RPG days, you know, where if it's like if you use cut or slash or, you know, gun or whatever, it just told you that you did that, you know, like that is what happened. There was no visual. So the fact that they actually said, no, we're gonna, you know, Bubble Beam is going to look different than Bubble. It's not just all going to be Water Attack 1 through 10 are all exactly the same. Considering the constraints, I thought was actually pretty impressive.
Well, and this is another place that the color gave them one more tool, because when you only have 4 tools, it's like, wow, look at all the creative things they did with this. And then if you give someone 1,000 tools, you expect a disproportionate improvement, because it's like, well, now you can do anything. But adding literally, because there's never more than I think 4 colors on screen, or maybe like I think it's a single digit number. It's not a lot, right? It's not like they turned it into a Super Nintendo. That was the Game Boy Advance, was like a Super Nintendo in your pocket. So this is still very few colors, but then like you get a little pop of color on certain attacks, and most of the attacks do not use any color. So when there is some color in the attack, you're like, whoa, like right at the end of the game, my Gyarados got, yes, I got a Gyarados. My Gyarados got
nice.
Hyper Beam.
It's a pain to get one of those, isn't it?
Huge. I did not do that on stream because that would have been boring for everyone. So I did that like as a fidget while I was, I'm not going to say in meetings, but it's while I was in meetings, and I just did it as like a fidget with my thumbs. But like that's like a super, you only have 5 PP to use that move because it's like an ultra murder move. And it's colors, Duke. The colors, like it's so, and it makes it so visually distinct from just like a regular beam attack, right? So they added color in a way that wasn't just like, oh, now everything will be colored. Most of the attacks are actually still black and white. But then where the color pops, it's like, whoa, holy crap. Like, did you see that? Right. It's just, they were really good at using very few and very simple ingredients to not just great effect, but in staggering variety.
Yes. No, absolutely. The other big note that I have for visuals is, and this is kind of like a visual / mechanics thing, is that the trainers that you run into, there's a whole bunch of them, but once you kind of get used to it, they always kind of pair the visual of this trainer, like in the name as well, to what type of Pokemon they're going to be using. So that's pretty helpful in a rock paper scissors game to know that your opponent's pretty much always going to be throwing rock. So and one could definitely make the argument that it's kind of like, okay, you're giving the game away, but that's what the the final 4 kind of is for. Is it's like, they're the super uber masters or whatever. Like the main thing about the Pokemon, the grinding, is to get your team where you want it to be, right? So if you've got somebody who's going to be throwing out like wild stuff all over the place, then it's just going to get frustrating because you're like, look, I just need to kind of quickly beat these guys. So I need to know that they're going to be throwing out tons of poison Pokemon, that I can just use my Butterfree and use Confusion and knock them all out. And they're kind of like testing whether or not you've got the rock, paper, scissors mechanics of it. But yeah, so those visuals are always tied. And I don't think they ever really, I don't think that a hiker ever threw like a water Pokemon at me or anything like that, so.
No, and if there are exceptions like that, they're super, super exceptional, right? Where maybe it's like, oh, this is an X/Y type, haha, right? Like that's why it technically makes sense for this trainer to have it, but they don't do that kind of thing until fairly late in the game. And to exactly your point, like they have to drive home the type system, because I can't think of a better, I'm sure there is, but I can't think of a better term for this than rock, paper, scissors. But it's 1 degree more complicated because there's also a lot of just neutral, right? There's a lot of like, this Pokemon isn't weak or strong. And the reason that matters is because then it's like, you need to know that the literal Pokemon you literally have out on the field, their normal attack sucks. So just because the other Pokemon doesn't have high defense against normal attacks, your normal attacks are not particularly good, right? So like there is that, it's like rock, paper, scissors exception, right? Like it's like you're playing 2 games of rock, paper, scissors, like the types and then also the stats. But I think they basically spend, if the game is 30 hours long, they spend 28 of those hours beating into how the type system works. And then the last stretch on Victory Road and the Elite Four is, okay, now prove you understand it.
Prove you understand it, and prove that you've built a team out of 6 Pokemon, because I forget exactly how many types there are, but I think there's like 12.
Yeah, it's a bunch. Like it's that's why I say it's like rock, paper, scissors kind of gets to the heart of it, but it's like a 20 layer rock, paper, scissors.
Let's say that there's 12 different, types, right? Is that basically they're hammering into you like, you need to know what's strong and what's weak. And then more importantly is that you've got all 12, either A, you have just grinded like a fiend and can just walk through regardless of type, right? And you've got like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of potions in your bag to just keep, to just brute force your way through the problem, or that you've built out a team such that you've got all 12 of the types covered with only 6 Pokemons. That means that you have to make sure that, all right, this is my grass and poison type. Like this is my, flying and, psychic type, or what have you, right? And then, of course, you run into one where you're like, yeah, I got my psychic type out. But oh no, my psychic type is weak against this fighting type, which is what I was going to use it against, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I didn't stray too far from what I did back in the day, like with what I beat the Elite for back in the day with was what I was training up for today. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about how the campaign versus like competitive play and like the later games, how the type system is different in those two situations. But I will to bring this back to visuals, cosign they do a good job of like, you're out near a mountain, you're going to run into hikers, and that means rock and ground types. You're out in the water, like you're surfing, it's all swimmers and beauties, and they all have water types, right? Or the fishermen all have water types. So like you can kind of say, not only I know what's coming at me, but like to even get through this area, like to get from A to B, I know that basically every single trainer here is going to have like water types. So I should probably not go through here with my 6 pet rocks, because they're not going to be super successful in here. And even if my pet rocks are my main 6 that I normally have with me, I just won't use them to get from here to there, right? And so they do a good job of at least saying, to get through this area, you need to understand that we're going to like really drive home the fire types or the grass types or the water types or the rock types or whatever. And then you can kind of like, when it's time to deal with the gym leader, that's when they're like, okay, if you want to continue in the story, you got to prove you understand how to beat rock types or whatever. And the visuals don't only support that out in the routes, like when you're traveling between places, but this is another place where that single pop of color, because all of the towns are named for colors. So like,
right.
I probably had a much easier time recognizing what town I was in compared to you, because all of the towns look damn near identical if you're just looking at the tiles. Like all the houses are basically shaped the same way with a couple of exceptions. Like they're mostly decorated. They have very different layouts, but they're all a single color. So every town,
layouts that typically make no sense given the outside of the building. They're all TARDISes.
Yeah, right. So you have these weird, short, super wide buildings that are all at least like they pop with color when you're playing on the Game Boy Color or with the Super Game Boy. So like visually, the towns are probably the one place where they don't reinforce what's going on without color. Whereas out in the wilderness, the trainers are all like of their area. Right, just like the Pokemon are sort of their area, the trainers are all like, oh, we're near the mountains, so hikers. We're in the water, so swimmers.
Yeah, no, agreed. Do you have anything else big for visuals?
I did have one other thing I wanted to give big thumbs up to, because I did a fair amount of grinding at a couple of points, right? Like I had to get my Gyarados. I grinded up a couple other ones that I swapped in for people I'd been using. And you can disable the battle animations, which this is too early in history for me to believe that was there for accessibility reasons. I'm pretty sure that was there to just make grinding faster. And man, does it make grinding faster.
You can speed up the text too.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And there's just, at this time in history, I really don't believe that they were like, oh, well, the flashing might be, because it wasn't until Pokemon Yellow that the flashing started to like make people have seizures, right? So I know that this is not there for accessibility reasons, which is unfortunate that it's that by accident. But just like mechanically, some of the attack animations are like long enough, right? Long enough that if you're just doing battle after battle after battle after battle, I'd rather not have them. So
right.
I guess this note is essentially, I liked the battle animations and also that I didn't have to look at them if I didn't want to. Not because they were bad, but just because they take time.
That you could take them in at your leisure. And that was the one final throwaway note I had for visuals, which was that going in and out of a building, it would flash. So like you leave a building, it flashes white, and then it brings you into the next thing, which you wouldn't even notice unless, let's say, hypothetically, you had your 5-year-old just tooling around and he kept walking in and out of a building over and over again because he didn't know what he was doing, right? Like then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna have a seizure. I'm not epileptic, you know. So again, I was just kind of like, why does that exist? Why not just smash cut to the thing? But like I said, that was just kind of a throwaway note. Audio?
Yeah, these songs are so good, dude. Like
They're so good. So good, man.
Okay, so I think I've said this before, but a lot of my Pokemon experience with my hands on a controller interacting with what could arguably referred to as Pokemon is in Smash Brothers. And I know that that's not Pokemon in any way, but when you're talking about literally the visuals and literally the music, yeah, it super is, because they took visuals straight out of the Pokemon universe, and more importantly for this case, the music, right? And that like battle, like it's the theme song that's playing when you first boot the game up, that dun 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 dun. Like it's actually a really catchy, good piece of music, which is why they use that in Smash Brothers, where they have like the full crazy orchestrated version with the whole choir. It's amazing. Like, so in my mind, I was kind of like, I'm hearing the Game Boy version, but part of me was like hearing the Super Smash Brothers version.
Yeah, no, I think that for me, I queued it up and I heard the like the super, chip tuney, and I was just kind of like, all right, because I was kind of just sitting down and getting ready, get my water and all sorts of stuff, and then all of a sudden I heard do 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 do. I was like, oh no, I'm in now, right? And so like there's that, which is amazing, but like all of the songs are super catchy and memorable, right? I mean, like the do 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 do, like the Pokemart, even because you're in there all the time, right? So like the fact that music has like this kind of like poppy kind of feel to it, like the do 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 do, and then it loads the Pokemon and it goes do 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 do, like that. The fact that little sound effect matches with the song, because they know that like these two things are gonna go hand in hand basically all the time. I was like, that was kind of cool, I mean, the bicycle song is awesome. The all the different towns you go to are awesome. The musical, even the musical cue before you go into battle, it's just all great. It's great music,
Yeah, it's kind of it's frustrating and shocking to me when people are able to take what sounds the Game Boy was able to generate and then write really catchy music with it. And then you play like a modern game and you're like, this music sort of sucks. How did you get beat by an original Game Boy? And that's when you kind of have to step back and you're like, oh, the technology isn't everything. Because this game, like every NES game, suffers from the music takes a back seat when certain sound effects are happening because they can't produce enough sound simultaneously, and coming out of the Game Boy speaker would have sounded like garbage even if they could. So the fact that the music dips out and then comes back, and it's like they're such simple, catchy tunes, and it's not as jarring as some of the Nintendo games we've played where the music is like freaking out trying to keep up with the sound effects. I was just like, oh man, this to me, the visuals, I forgot to say this when we were talking about the visuals do a really good job of letting you know that this is just all a big faff. Like, this isn't serious. No one's life is in danger. Nobody ever dies. No Pokemon are ever seriously hurt, right? Like, it's dogfighting simulator, but it's fine. Everybody's fine. Nobody ever dies. Everything is fine. And the visuals do a really good job of supporting that, but I honestly think the music does it even better. The music, even when it's tense, like the boss, like the gym battle boss sort of music, or like when you're in the cave and it's like a little spooky, it's like, it's not scary, it's spooky. And things are never spooky. Yeah, spooky. Things are never like dire. They're just like tense, and it's like, I gotta beat this gym leader. not so I don't die, but it's so I can be the very best. Like everything is so like fluffy and safe. And the music just does this incredible job of just keeping you kind of at like a 6 max. Like even when things are at their scariest, they're not, it's like, okay, I'll just wake back up at the Poke Center and we'll just go take another crack at it. It's fine. It's fine. Nobody dies. Everything is fine. Like, and music, it does something to our brains in a way that nothing else really does. And this, if there was even one time in this where it was just like, bah, 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 like that it would shatter the whole illusion. Cause you'd be like, oh no, this universe has stakes, but the universe doesn't have stakes. Everything is fine.
I mean, cause that's the thing, is that you're training to beat the final 4 for funsies. Like you're not doing it because you need money for your mother's surgery or, anything like that. You're just doing it because this is your hobby and this is the end point of your hobby. Like that's why you do it, because you want to be the very best, like no one ever was, So and could not agree more that the music absolutely relays that. And even the sound effects like relay that, in the sense that when Onyx comes out of his shell, he's like, "Rawr!" But it's kind of like a "Rawr," It's not like the like he comes out and all of a sudden the screen goes, because Onyx is scary, dude. Like he's intimidating, but
dragon made out of rocks.
Yeah, like that gets your attention. Oh God, I wanted an Onyx so bad when I was a kid. And it's not a great Pokemon to field. Like Graveler's better, and I'm sure I'm gonna get added by like a million Onyx fans about the
like, Onyx.
Well,
stands.
no, you didn't. Yeah, because I mean, I'll tell you what. Like that's the thing, and obviously we can get into more mechanics. Is that there is a depth to which Pokemon evolves better, and if you really wanted to field and all that sort of stuff, I was like, man, I went for the ones that were powerful and that I liked. Like if I liked it, it was on my team. If it Gyarados may not be the most powerful water type Pokemon, but he's the coolest. So
no question.
He's on the team. Yeah. One of the things that I will say that I just could not, oh man, I hated it so much from a sound effect standpoint, was the "you're low on health" noise.
Bana, 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 bana.
Ooh. And because here's the thing, right? Is that I actually juxtaposed it to Doom 2016 because I think that's fair.
Yeah. No recency bias happening there.
No recency bias, no like tonal shift between those two games. It'd be amazing to see Doom 2016 directed by like a Pokemon team, and then a Pokemon game directed by
like get John
Doom
Carmack in there doing the next Pokemon.
I'm just picturing, like Doom Slayer doing a glory kill on Pikachu. Anywho, so no, is that in Doom there is a sound effect that lets you know that you're low on health. You get hit really hard, you get low on health because that bleep bleep, and then that's it. Because you've been made aware of the problem. The problem is that you are low on health, right? So in case you missed it, right, which again, with the visuals of where the health bar is and all sorts of stuff is probably unlikely, but if you missed it, hey, ping ping, you're low on health, right? That's all you need. If I'm low on health, I am going to assume, unless I heal that Pokemon, that status has not changed. And I don't need a constant reminder. I don't need an everything's the same alarm.
This alarm will sound. Yeah, no. I mean, this is such an early video game thing.
Yeah, and it just sucks. Like I hate it. And because the only thing it does is make me burn potions that I don't need to burn, because I just want to turn the sound off. Which I mean, I guess is humane if you look at it. If I'm gonna do what I do, which is like bask in awfulness of universes, right? There is something to be said about the Pokemon perpetually crying out in pain for you to heal it.
Help me,
because
help
I'm like,
me, help me, help
me, dying. Because I mean, like I'll sit there and be like, you have 5 health, you're fine, and it's like. But, that being said, I, the player, do not need to be made perpetually aware of that. So that was obnoxious.
Yeah. And I realized that this is actually a place where the proper argument is probably not you should play this on a Super Game Boy. It's probably you should play this on a Game Boy Color, because I thought the low health noise was kind of annoying. The noises that I found more grating were the like throwing them out there screeches, where some of the Pokemon, like, they hit the stage, they hit the battle arena and they're like, "Roar!" And it's not that the sound effect is a good Game Boy sound effect, and it's not really meant to be heard through modern television speakers and like high fidelity headphones. So that's an area where the tune skis are super catchy, but some of the sound effects, they were designed to be heard from a little tiny speaker that's like 3 feet away from you, right? So yeah, probably maybe go Game Boy Color, not the full, or just turn your TV down or something. Because like there are some sound effects that they are terrible because they were meant to be heard under specific circumstances on specific hardware. So I don't think that forgives them entirely, but it's not a nostalgia thing. It's a like, well, if you listen to the sound of a plane taking off from inside the terminal, that's a very different experience than if you are standing with your head inside of the engine, right? Like saying, oh, this plane taking off is too loud. It's like, well, circumstances kind of matter here a little bit. So I really hated a lot of the noises that the Pokemon made when they were like being thrown out onto the field. But I think it's a fair asterisk to say I was hearing them in a way they were not intended to be heard, and at a volume they were not intended to be heard at. So annoying sounds, but like kind of my fault.
Well, and that's an interesting kind of thing, because we've had a number of different, kind of, I don't want to say hiccups, but like when you go back and you review old games where you can kind of quibble on some gray areas, one of our most famous ones is I don't think that with modern video games I should ever have to read a pamphlet. Ever. I don't want to be functionally literate. I don't want to read. I want to play a video game. I didn't come to this video game to read. Came here to play video games. And you're like, but it expected you to read it. And I'm like, I don't care. I came here to play video games. So anyways, that's not the point. Other than the fact that I'm right. That's not the point. The point is, anyways, but it's that there are things like that where you can say either game expectations, but I think that this is an even harder asterisk than that, because it's like, we don't know. We literally can't review it based off of the way it actually was meant to be heard, because I was listening to it with earbuds in, so it's like I heard it piped directly into my inner ear canal as opposed to gently from a distance, and at a volume that I can very easily just turn down so that way it seems even further away, so fair point. But as far as it if you have an everything's okay alarm, especially, or things like that, that it does negate any other possible sound effect that could be thrown at you, because it's like, my brain is filled up with this everything's okay alarm. So I can't suddenly pay attention to the fact that they're using Screech, which I should be paying attention to because they only do have those 5 hit points and maybe it matters.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's a gentler way to still do this with audio. Like maybe fire the "you're super hurt" alarm like once or twice and then don't bring the music back in. Maybe like so something besides a fire alarm, right? Just something besides this alarm will continue to go off until the building burns down or the firefighter says that the fire has been extinguished, right? Because it's such an of its time. And I bet there are some modern games that maybe the modern Pokemon even still do this just to like harken back to this time. But like in the latest Legend of Zelda and Breath of the Wild, they still do this because this is just a thing that Zelda games do. And I wouldn't be surprised if the modern Pokemon games do it for the same reason. But it's like, guys, figure out some other way to communicate to me that there is a I might lose problem beyond I'm hurt. Like, ugh.
And even something that I like even better than, I mean, I love the idea of the music just being gone, because I like that, because if you like the music, then that does motivate you still to, I'm going to give this Pokemon a potion because I don't want to lose the music. Even if it's like, I like in games when you're really, really low on health that, the sound effects, everything kind of ducks out and all you hear is like a heartbeat, which is actually very similar to the doo 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 doo. It would just be it's just lower, like it's just less annoying.
There's a hardware limitation. They would not be able to project a bass tone from that garbage little speaker that would travel all the way up to your ears. It would just sound like the thing was rattling.
Yeah. Well,
I mean in modern games, right? They could totally do that, but on a Game Boy, it would just the physical magnet that makes up the speaker wouldn't be able to produce a like bum 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 bum. You would just get like click 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 click.
But that being said, is again, kind of a pass for the older Pokemon. No excuses for new game. But anyways, that's all I kind of had for audio.
Yeah, I mean, Game Boy games are always a little like light, because as we've said multiple times, and we will continue to say, because I think this is a super smart observation we made, this game, like every Game Boy game, there's a presumption that you are probably playing it with no sound, because you're in the backseat of the minivan and mom and dad are like, I swear to God, if you don't turn that thing off, and you're like, sorry, and you don't actually turn the game off, you just turn the volume all the way down, right? So
yeah. They say if you don't turn that down, I'm going to throw that Tamagotchi out the window. Yeah.
Yeah. But I appreciate the hardware limitations and the circumstantial, like contextual time of play limitations, where it's like, I don't know, this kid might not be able to have the sound on at all, right? Or maybe they dropped it in a puddle and now the speaker doesn't work because it got water into the speaker, whatever. So like, it's modern games, please do better. Older games, please go back in time and stop relying on an everything's okay alarm.
So this is a slightly tangential story, but the like you said, with the parents being, like if you don't turn that thing off, right? Just the other day, so my son and I have been playing Minecraft together, just whenever we get a chance, right? And literally so my son is sitting next to me on the couch, right? And we're playing Minecraft, which you can't pause. Like I can hit start, but it's just gonna pull up the menu screen on my side because it's
even by yourself.
So, I'm not sure if it pauses when you're by yourself, but I know that it doesn't when you're in multiplayer mode, right? So, which is fine because we're also playing on pacifist mode. So, I mean, there's nothing that can reasonably hurt me unless I throw myself off a cliff, right? So Megan came to talk to me. So she came and started speaking with me, and all of a sudden Teddy goes like this. Mom, you're in the way. And I said, oh my God, you're a mom. Look at that. You just walked into the room, you stood in front of the TV, you started having a conversation, right? And it was blocking the TV. I'm like, you're a mom today. Like that's how it happens, right? It's just slowly over time.
You thought it was when you got pregnant or when you gave birth. No, it's when you stood between a kid and a video game and you called it a Nintendo.
Yes. And I said like, oh, look, you're a mom. You're in the way of the video game. And she said, do you want to get up and go do these things? And I said, no. And so I dropped it.
I've taken this as far as I'm willing to.
Yep. Controls and mechanics?
Yeah, I have one thing to say about the controls specifically, which is This is a 2-button game, and for all intents and purposes, it performs fantastically well as a 2-button game because it's a JRPG and you don't need a lot of complicated controls for the way this game functions. You pause or you get to the menu with start because where else are they going to put it? But there is a useful thing behind the select button, which is you can rearrange your Pokemon's moves with the select button. So like if the most useful move that you use to solve most problems is in the 3rd slot and you want it to be in the 1st slot, you press select. And that might be in the manual. I only use the manual for the type chart because they actually ship it with the game because they know it's going to be a chore to try and figure it all out yourself. But somebody in chat had to tell me, they were like, you could rearrange the moves with the select button. And I was like, I never, ever, ever would have guessed that. Like, never in a million billion years. And it's select twice. So it's like select to pick the one you want to move, and then you scroll to the other one and you press select to switch those two things, like cup style. And I was just like, man, this is. Ooh, I would not have ever figured that out on purpose. Maybe by accident. And it gives a little visual indicator, like when you have one you're going to move selected, it like flashes the little triangle, that arrow that points at it flashes. But yeah, never in a million billion years. So
nope, I still didn't know that.
Yeah.
I've been playing Pokemon forever, so no, did not know that. Kind of cool. So this is okay. So this is it's a JRPG, right? Which means that grinding's a thing, right? I tried this time. So normally I am the king of grinding in video games, right? I mean, like I played when I played Final Fantasy Tactics, I ground so hard that I think I got up to a level that you would normally be when you were beating the final boss before I even left the prologue, or something like that.
Yeah, you were like, because each little like dot you move through is a battle opportunity, and you stayed within like a 3 battle radius, which is like, the first 45 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I just did that. So, but this time I was like, I'm going to see kind of what I can get accomplished without grinding. So this kind of changes the equation a little bit, and this just tickles me, right? So basically, right, is that you've got 6 Pokemon slots, right? There is no point in having a Pokemon fight unless it's going to be one of your final 6, right? Because you're basically throwing experience into a bucket that you're eventually going to throw into the sea and forget about forever, right? So therefore, you don't want to do that, right? And so then you have to think, but again, there is an unlimited amount of experience, right? But the best way, the fastest way to get experience is by fighting with other trainers, because they can actually have Pokemon that are of a decent level or evolved, which gives you way more experience, right? I stopped going through the tall grass that much because I started thinking about experience, not in units experience, but in units time, right? So how many minutes have I poured into each Pokemon? And when I started doing that is I said, like, okay, so I had like a Nidoran that I poured some experience into, but then stopped. I honestly, halfway through the game, still only had 4 Pokemon that I could reasonably field. I still had in my like walking around library a level 5 Sparrow, just because there was nothing I had picked up yet that was worth slotting in and dumping experience into. Because I'm like, I don't need a Mankey. I don't need a fighting type Pokemon. I've got that covered. Like everything that fighting type Pokemon is strong against, I got all that covered with other Pokemon. I don't need that. I don't need that dumb, stupid Mankey. Don't need him. Dead to me. But did you feel the Mankey?
I did very briefly. No, for
Okay.
literally like 30 minutes. And then I was like, I am having to work to get him out on the field, and then he drops. And so I guess this just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. So bye. I'm going to shovel you off to someone's PC. Who you later find out whose PC that is, but just the fact that for a third of the game, it's like, I don't know, just someone's, doesn't matter.
Well, and it's weird that Bill's PC is where your Pokemon go and your PC is where your items go. It's like, shouldn't that maybe be the opposite? Like, the thing you care about the most is your Pokemon, so you store them on your PC. I don't know. It's weird. That whole mechanic is weird.
It is. But anyways, the moral of the story being is that there is a way to progress through the game without a tremendous amount of grinding, but you have to be very careful with the way that you allot the experience. But failing to do so does not equal a failure state. It just means that if at any point you find that you are struggling, what that means is that you're just going to have to dump more time into it, right? To gain basically avatar strength, right? Because the core skill of the game is masterable very quickly because it's rock, paper, scissors, right? So if at some point you miss out on the fact that you're like, oh man, I just leveled up, my whatever Rattata into Eradicate and spent a whole bunch of time and energy in this garbage Pokemon. It's like, well, it's gone, and now you're just going to have to spend half an hour slugging through the tall grass to get your, the Pokemon that you have to, Magikarp up into a Gyarados now, because that's the right call. So it the game punishes you in units time, ultimately.
Well, and what I think is really speaks to the balance of the experience from a mechanical standpoint in support of like those mechanics supporting the narrative is this game really does not want you to do what you just described. This game and the entirety of Pokemon, right? Like up to the modern day, the point is not to already know which 6 are the most broken, and then as soon as you get them, only use them and then just solve all your problems with them. But it also does 0 things to punish you if you choose to play that way, right? The game is about catching them all and filling out the Pokedex and trading with your friends and experimenting, right? Because for you, like you already knew, like you're like, okay, I want this tool, and this tool. And for me, I was like, I recognize this one. I don't know what that one is, but it looks cool as hell, right? Like, so there was a lot of experimentation and like literally learning about the Pokemon, which is if you're coming to the series new, or if you've just been consuming it through pop culture, like that's what all of the narrative wants you to be doing. And I think it's not easy to say, we're going to build a system that will make min-maxers super jazzed because they will find this Pokemon in this location can get to this evolved form, which means it learns this move super fast, which means I can walk through the first 3 gyms with just that one Pokemon. You know what I mean? Like the game absolutely allows that kind of gameplay, but narratively it's not pushing you in that direction. And that's not easy. It's not easy to say min-maxers and filthy casuals can play the exact same game and yet somehow have totally opposite experiences that they are both satisfied with. And that's probably, I think, a key ingredient of what made this game so enduring, or this series so enduring, is because you were able to go back to it and be like, okay, I want these tools. I'm going to get them in this order and I'm going to use them to solve problems in this way. And you found that to be enjoyable because the tools worked the way you thought they would, and you were able to build the things you wanted to build. And for me, I was like, oh, Mankey, he's kind of cool. He's like got like some monkey kung fu. And then I tried him out and I was like, all right, he sort of sucks. Like, all right, I'm going to bring like some of my other Pokemon back in. And like, you can just have this like kind of playful experience that somehow exists in the same sandbox as the kids having the min-max experience, but like they're not fighting each other. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's you see, I find a Pokemon I like, I take it. I teach it to hate. I teach it to win. I take a Pokemon, I load it in the chamber, pull the trigger, blam. Yeah. No, so no, agreed. And actually it's interesting because the other thing that I really reflected on for this one is the differences between internal and external rewards, right? Or intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards. Specifically, the example I'm going to pull in is, have you played either of the new Spider-Man games, the Spider-Man or Spider-Man Miles Morales?
No, but they're on my short list because I've heard universally positive things.
They're solid. I actually had since I got my brand new PS5, I re-downloaded Spider-Man, and I was like, I'm gonna just sit down and play this, and I did. And one of the things I realized, and I promise I'll bring this back to Pokemon in a second, is that there's a fast travel system in that game, right? So you can be halfway across New York, and you're like, I got to go all the way down to southern Manhattan, and doing that by just traversing and webbing about probably takes 2 minutes, right, of real life time, 2 to 3 minutes, or you can just fast travel. It'll get you there in like 5 to 6 seconds. I probably used the fast travel a grand total of 3 times the entire time I played the game. Reason why is because swinging around Manhattan, the traversal system that they built in that game is just fun.
That's the whole reason to play a Spider-Man game.
Yeah. It's because I just liked Spider-Manning around, right? I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna web zip here, and then I'm gonna do a double tap here, and then I'm gonna zip around here. I'm gonna release here. It was just intrinsically fun, right? You didn't have to like, I didn't gain levels. There were sometimes they're like, if you do this, you'll gain experience while you're webbing about. I'm like, I don't care about the experience. I care about the experience or the skills or the levels. I'm just having fun doing what I'm doing, right? That being said, is I would actually argue that the game of Pokemon, the actual combat has very, very little intrinsic reward to it, in the sense that it's like you press a button, a thing happens. You press a button, a thing happens, right? It's not very intrinsically rewarding. So to me, the extrinsic reward is perfectly themed, though, to the core aesthetic of exploration, right? This game is about exploration, top to bottom, right? So what are you exploring, right? New Pokemon. I want to know what this Pokemon evolves into. I want to know what new Pokemon. There's 151 out there. Like what's in this tall grass? Oh my god, a Primate? What even is that? And what does it evolve into? Does it evolve into anything? Oh my god, look at this Onyx, and it can use Screech, and what's the seismic toss and all this other sort of stuff. So the interesting thing though is that because even though the battles themselves are not intrinsically rewarding, the speed at which they drip feed you that exploration is fast. You're exploring and discovering new things all the time, which is why the other trainers exist and challenge you so quickly, is because 90% of them have like the standard Machop and all this sort of stuff, but then one of them will have a Clefairy. What is a Clefairy? What can I get? I want one of those. What is that? Like what kind of attacks does it use? Oh man, I'm gonna go grind in the tall grass. You really care about grinding? Well, not so much, but what if you find an Abra? Oh my god, an Abra, but then it teleported away right away. How do I stop it from doing that? Like those types of things. It gives you so many little discoveries, so many little explorations so quickly that it doesn't even like click that all of these discoveries are being held behind this grinding. And you're not really doing the grinding because the grinding is in and of itself fun. You're doing it to unlock the next chapter in the book, but the next chapters get unlocked so quickly, that you don't even notice it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
So I do agree with all of this. I like that you can't capture trainer Pokemons because that gives them the safety as the game designers to do exactly what you were just saying. Like, we want to tease out a bunch of like wild and crazy Pokemon, but you can't have them. You got to go find them, go exploring, right? So like
catch them.
If you could catch them all, if you could catch trainer Pokemon, then they would have to just only have ones that were wild in the area you were in, which would be way less interesting. There would be way less of that like little curiosity teaser. The movements are the moves are kind of the same way, where it's like you learn a new move and it's like exciting. I will say this about that though. The one place where I think, at least in my experience, please just tell me I'm an idiot, because
you're an idiot.
Okay. No, thank you. No, that was good. Podcast over. I think I think the one place where that fell down for me, right, because I now have modern games literacy, is a Pokemon levels up. Yay! It wants to learn a new move. Awesome. It only has 4 moves, so it needs to replace a move. And I'm looking at this screen, just sweat pouring down, because I'm like, I don't have any of this internalized. I have no idea if this new move is better. I don't even know what kind of move it is. Please let me press select and tell me something useful about the moves I have, the move you're offering me. It's like, just imagine, because I mean, this is essentially a bartering experience, right? Just imagine if you went into a pawn shop and you had a black box and they had a black box, and you were like, do you want to trade this black box for that black box? And it's like, maybe your black box is a slightly different size and these 2 black boxes are slightly different weights, but that doesn't really help me understand whether or not I would want to make this trade. So generally speaking, I would say, yes, you're right. Everything is like pushing you toward exciting and novel exploration. The TMs, to a lesser extent, the HMs, and learning new moves as you level up, for me, brought that to a very stressful halt, where I found myself very heavily relying on Twitch chat to be like, do I want this move? which move should I replace with this move, right? Because I was just like, these names are meaningless to me. Saying like cut is like the upgraded version of scratch. So if you have a Pokemon that you need to teach cut to so you can cut down the bushes and like proceed through the game, if you have one that already has scratch, that's a good one to teach cut to, because you can overwrite scratch with cut, and it is, for all intents and purposes, just a better version of that move. Nothing about the words scratch and cut guarantees you that cut is mechanically superior, right? And those are simple words that are like in the normal lexicon. When you get into some of the like hyper beam, like, is hyper beam better than ice beam? Or do hypers hurt more than ice? I don't know. Probably. But because there's so many moves and so many Pokemon and so many made up words and so many like weird combinations of real words. That was the one time where I was just like, I wish I had a little more information, because I don't feel like I can safely explore this. If I learn this move, if I waste this TM, if I do whatever, am I going to then forever regret that? You never have that feeling with seeing and catching new Pokemon, right? It always feels safe. And worst case, you catch one you already caught. No big deal, right? The moves, I wanted just a little bit more information to make that exploration feel safer, because there's no way to go back. You're stuck.
Oh yeah, your host. And that's entirely a legit feeling. The way I dealt with that, so the feeling is legitimate. This is just the way that I like kludged it. Was one is that out of the 4 moves, I always had the one that I was like, because you're never going to use all 4, right? Like, even if each one had 20 pp to it, like that's 80. That's 80 different rounds of combat, right? Even if you exclusively use that Pokemon, you're not going to burn through it all. So it's like, which one of these 4 moves do I not use ever anymore? So I was always like, that was the one that was always, if it was like, this person's trying to use this, I'm like, well, I don't use this other move anymore ever. So it's gone. That, or if it was like, especially if it's like, I have 2 ice attacks, then this is the ice attack I always use, so this other one's gone, because I basically have like the experimental slot, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good way to think about it, because there are some moves that work well in concert, like do A and then B, right? Put them to sleep and then beat them to death kind of thing. But that felt like more the exception. So having this is my primary weapon, this is my secondary weapon, this is my tertiary weapon or my super weapon, and then this is my let's try out some new stuff slot. So basically that's a good way to solve that problem.
Yeah, all my Pokemon had 3 attacks, and then the weird one. And if that weird one was stellar, then it's like, all right, well, now which one's my other one? For TMs, when I used to play, I never used them, because I was like, well, how do I know which Pokemon's going to be the one to use it with? And how do I know? I was so fast and loose with TMs this time. The minute I got one, I immediately assigned it and didn't even, it was like, this is a brief tangent, but I was playing, have you ever played the game Exploding Kittens?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, for our listeners who don't know, it's a card game where there's a deck of cards. If you draw an exploding kitten, then you lose, right? So there were 3 exploding kittens left. Sorry, there were 1 exploding kitten left in the deck and like 5 cards left, right? So I'm sitting there like looking at my hand and looking at the cards. I'm like running math. I'm like, okay, there's a 20% chance that I'm going to draw this card. So if I pass it, then that, but then I have no counterplay. I was like, all right, I drew the card. It wasn't an exploding kitten. I put it down. And then my opponent just literally immediately just reached out, snatched, drew the next card, threw it down, was an exploding kitten, said, go. And and I was still coming down off of the adrenaline of my draw, right? And so I said, like, that was me like slowly bringing the gun up to my head and like pulling the trigger and be like, and you just snatching the gun out of my hand, just like pulling the trigger immediately and then just handing it back to me and be like, go. So that's the way I was with TMs this time, because I was like, ooh, a TM, wonder what it does. Assign it to this Pokemon. Oh, that TM sucked. Or this Pokemon sucks and it's gone forever. I guess that TM's gone. Oh, well. And then just moved on with life, No,
so I totally had the first time RPG experience where I think I used maybe 3 of the TMs I found in the entire game, which means my PC is just loaded with TMs. You know what else I literally carried all the way through the final battle? The 1 elixir that I found.
Yep, because what if you need it?
What if I needed it? Right. So I literally, I had the traditional RPG experience where I was like, well, but I don't know which Pokemon would most benefit from these TMs, so I'll just never use them, and then I'll never know.
Yes. One of the things that I felt would reduce grinding. So the fact that you can turn off the animations, that's great. I found a number of times. Okay, one quick on that. There should be some moves that just should not exist. Just because of the way they work mechanically. Wrap is one of them. Anytime like a Pokemon is like, this Pokemon used Wrap, I'm like, well, call me when they're done. You know, like I don't. It was like they used, especially if your Pokemon is slower than that Pokemon. It's like their attack continues, their attack continues, their attack continues. They used Wrap, son of a, you know, it's like, why am I here, game? Do you want to just play? Like, I mean, if you want to play with yourself, I mean, like, that's fine. I'm going to leave the room and lock the door. So those moves shouldn't exist at all. That being said, there were definitely times when, you know, I used Tackle and the other person used Tackle, and then I used Tackle and the other person used Tackle. I'm like, okay, we're just going to sit there in this Vegeta versus Goku Super Saiyan 2 slugfest, right? Until we're just going to stand here locked in a clash of battles until Judgment Day and trumpets sound, right? You know, like that's what's going to happen, right? So I felt that one of the things the game could benefit from that would make some of the grinding less grindy is the ability to chain moves, by which I mean, you know, and again, this is kind of like a far-flung note, but like if I know that no matter what the other Pokemon does, I'm going to use Tackle for the next 4 times. I wish I could just say, use Tackle, like tackle, you know what I'm saying? Like just slot in the next 4 rounds of what I'm going to do. And then the risk to reward is that they may decide to do something different, you know, and then, no, my strategy's gone or whatever. But if it's like, man, I've got my Graveler and you're using Tackle. So I think I've got a little bit of wiggle room on what's going to go down for the next 4 rounds. So just use Tackle for the next 4 turns. I'm going to go make a sandwich. You gameplay itself, and I'll be back. You know.
So this is around the time in history when I feel like a lot of RPGs started to have repeat, right? Or auto battle, which would literally just like whatever you did last round, we'll just keep doing that until you press a button. And
yeah,
yes,
stuff like that.
Every game, every JRPG should have at least some version of that. And that mechanic was not unheard of by 1998. So yeah, I agree with you. Just like tackle until I tell you to stop tackling or until they're dead. Either's fine.
Exactly. No, I felt that would be very helpful. The other, so like I said, Wrap and also Sand Attack is one that was very, very frustrating because the minute a Pidgey would show up and be like, they use Sand Attack, I'm like, ah. So again, like all you're gonna do is use Sand Attack and Peck, and that's not gonna do anything to me. Like you can't win, but also I can't hit you to save my life now, so I'm just gonna be doing this forever. That was wholly obnoxious. This is a minor one, but I gotta ask another human about it. What is and if one of our listeners knows, like normally I say don't at me. No, please enlighten me. So there is not a situation like this is not Final Fantasy Tactics where you can up your speed to the point where you can go multiple times before your opponent does. Your opponent always goes, and then you always go. You can go before them, or they can go before you, right?
Yeah, but it's always you both go, and then the round starts over. Correct.
What is the purpose of String Shot? Like something that reduces your opponent's speed?
Okay, so I'm going to cast about wildly. I'm super not an expert here, but I'm thinking if I have a Pokemon that is capable of defeating this Pokemon, but they will get worn down first, I might bring out my stat affecting Pokemon, String Shot, and then switch back to the damage dealing Pokemon.
So the only purpose of it is like sacrificially, like not to. I mean,
unless that same one is combined, like I need to slow you down so I can do this other thing, I guess.
unless like speed has like an effect that I don't know, because like the way I thought about it, it's like, okay, so the goal being is it's like, let's say you go, then I go, you go, then I go, right? So I'm like, but I want to go first. So I'm going to use string shot to slow you down. So that way I'll go first next round, right? Well, if you just, then I wasted that move, right? So if you take like the midpoint of like, or arbitrarily I can call the round starting at the middle, right? In which case then I was going and then you were going. You know what I'm saying? Like to use a full turn to reduce somebody's speed so that way they might go after you doesn't make any sense to me. Like I don't get that at all.
So it's possible that speed has other meanings besides just who goes first. And the only reason I'm saying that is not just because that's reasonable that could be a thing. That's true. But Gen 1 is, I think, the only generation that has a single special stat. So your special attack and your special defense are tied to a single stat called special. And then later they broke them up. I did not know any of this. Someone in chat told me this, so I'm not an expert here, but it's possible that like certain moves, it's kind of like in D&D how it's like, oh, there's a finesse weapon, so you add your dex. Like maybe there are certain moves that like speed is what determines their effectiveness, not strength or not power, whatever the hell it's called. I don't know that for sure, but I mean, it's all software. Like they can make it do anything.
Yep. So yeah, no, if anybody understands that for sure, and that's legitimate, but let me know. And then the one final note that I had was there's no quest log. There needs to be a quest log. I needed a quest log. I needed that. That was important. That, because like there was definitely like, turn it off, come back, say, right. What was I doing? No idea. Where do I go? What do I do? Especially in a game where they legitimately have you double back and go all over the map and all that kind of stuff. Like I need to know, even if it was just, what city am I supposed to be going to? How am I supposed to be getting there? Like travel to point A via route B. Fine. But yeah, the fact that this didn't have even just that, an entire Pokedex filled with nonsense about Pokemon, right? But not a single thing that says this is where you're supposed to be going. Like that would have been pretty clutch.
Yeah, I mean the closest thing you have is just the gym badge. You could just see like what is the last gym badge I acquired? I guess I should go seek out the next one in line.
But does it tell you where that next gym badge is?
Nah.
Yeah,
but I mean, the world is shaped in such a way that there's until about 2/3 of the way through the game, your options are very limited. You can go backwards, you can go forwards, because you get the HMs, right? So you can like cut and then flash, which lets you go through the cave, and then surf and strength.
Or you can just
fly,
wander through the cave without flash.
You can also do that, yeah.
not that somebody would do something like that.
No, it's
yeah,
insane.
No, that's legit. So basically the badges are kind of like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where you can know the position or the momentum, but you can't know both.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. So I want to, and I see we're starting to run long, but tough. It's our show. I want to talk about the social experience of this game, because I don't think we've played a lot of games that it's like, we didn't get to play the 2-player version, but it's like, that's usually fine, right? Until Streets of Rage, where it wasn't fine and you have to play that game 2-player. But like generally it's fine if you play a single player version of a game that also supports multiplayer. This game is not that. This game is so far above and beyond designed to be played with other people that you actually have to physically connect 2 Game Boys to get the full experience with 2 different cartridges. You can't even have 2 of the same cartridge, right? You need red, they need blue, whatever. So that's, I think, a big part of what made this experience palpable for me compared to the first time that I tried to play through Pokemon Yellow. And I said palpable when I meant palatable, but I appreciate you not like throwing that in my face.
I was like, you said it with such confidence. I was like, I don't think that was right. But I was
that right there is basically the attribution for all of my life success. Just like he seems so sure of himself.
Is that right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't want to call him out on it.
Yeah, no, that's how I got this house. I saw the owner outside mowing his lawn and I was like, thanks for cutting my grass. And he was like, you're welcome.
If the universe wanted you to behave differently, it should be doing more to disincentivize that behavior.
That must be it. But so what made this playthrough more palatable is I streamed the entire game because I didn't have a way to play it with you or we could actually trade Pokemon back and forth. So like I got my friends on the playground through streaming it on Twitch. So like you have that experience internalized, right? So like you remember what it was like to talk to your friends about Pokemon. I didn't get that originally, but I did get it this time. And that made all the difference because some people were like super helpful, but they were really good about waiting until I asked a direct question. Some people were even like, are you sure you want me to explain that to you? Right. And then there were like trolls. And then other people were like, I don't listen to that guy. He's just like being a jackass. I was like, this is exactly what it would have been like. I mean, I'm getting it in like a super high fructose corn syrup, like consolidated sort of way. But this is exactly what that would have been like to be, 10, 12, 14, playing this game with a real Game Boy, with a real link cable, up to and including the point that the link cable thing is so novel that in the game, in universe, you meet NPCs that you trade Pokemon with, and you get the mechanical benefits of doing that, which is traded Pokemon gain 1.5x experience, which is massive. It's massive. Oh, yeah. So like if you are playing with real people, like say, you're a Bulbasaur stan. So like what you really want is for me to trade you a Bulbasaur because now he will gain levels way ass faster, right? So like the physical hardware and the software work together in a way to support this social experience that I kind of associated with like Pokemon Go and like later newer Pokemons where it's like, oh, surely the more modern technologies when they were finally able to deliver on this promise. But no, going all the way back to Red and Blue, Gen 1, all of the pieces are there and they're not like proto fish with legs interpretations of the social features. They are completely fleshed out to the point where I was like, this is why I didn't like this game the first time I tried to play it, because I was trying to play Final Fantasy, the dogfighting edition, and that's not what it is. It's not that kind of RPG. It's this cutesy social RPG. And that's, to me, like if you were going to play this game and not try and have any of the social experience, I would say like maybe don't even bother, because that's such a core part of the way the game is designed that it's unlikely you would feel like you got the full experience without that kind of like social trading, talking with your friends on the playground, like icing on the cake. Like the cake is basically built to house that icing. So that's good or bad, right? I could still imagine somebody hating it, but like that was, to me, the key was social. The one hilarious way that backfired on me is somebody in chat was like, oh, yeah, this is where you can get into the Safari Zone, but don't worry, it's not really that big of a deal. It's just sort of a gimmick. And they were mistaken. There is a game required HM in there. That's where Surf is hit. So I actually wandered away from the Safari Zone by accident. They weren't trying to mess with me. It was a mistake. But like, and then I had to be like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Like I'm lost in a way I haven't been lost in the whole game. And then somebody else was like, oh, you have to go back into Safari Zone because that's where Surf is. And I was like, oh, what? I was told this was a gimmick.
Yeah, you said I didn't have to be in here. This is garbage.
Yeah, but yeah, so social, so key, so clutch.
So did it hold up?
I mean, I am going through it for the first time, so my rating is a little bit colored by the fact that I'm not legit like you are, right? I just recently became legit.
I mean, arguably it's more unbiased. Like you are less likely to have nostalgia goggles.
Yeah, well, yes, but we're asking a very specific question. Dude, I enjoyed the mess out of this. Like I enjoyed the absolute mess out of it. I played all the way through to the end. I defeated the Elite Four. I beat my stupid rival into the dirt. Like I liked talking with people about like, oh, well, I like this one. And they were like, oh, but this type's better. And I'm like, yeah, but I like this one more, right? Like just the kind of silly experience I can absolutely imagine having had. If I had had a Game Boy, this would have probably, like, my life would have been very different, right? You had a Game Boy, so your life was very different. If I had had a Game Boy, my life would have been very different, because I can imagine falling deep into this rabbit hole. And this is this is their freshman effort, right? This is the first generation, the first game. This isn't even Pokemon Yellow, where they like polished and rebalanced a few things. This is the freshman effort, and it was that enjoyable with that social layer. I honestly believe that social layer is critical to the experience, but I would recommend this to anybody, no problem.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in the same boat, man. No nostalgia goggles required. Game is lawful good. Crazy fun. Yeah, I mean, like, are there some areas where it's like, and sometimes it's interesting because, like, a lot of our reviews for games were like, this game was amazing, definitely play it. We say a lot of negative stuff because it's like, here are the few mild chinks in the armor, which are the only, because otherwise it would just be us gushing for, 2 hours. I'm like, oh my God, this was amazing. And then this was amazing. It's like, no, there's a ton of amazing stuff. Here are the couple of things that could have been done better. But yeah, no, the game is amazing. I especially think that, like you said, the social layer is very fun, is important. Like it's there's enough to the game that it's worth, that you can learn from it, right? Like, like I can be, oh man, I really enjoy, training this thing up, or I got a great experience from this. And then, and you can be like, oh, well, but this one has like a higher defense stat. So, I mean, it basically boils down to you teach me and I teach you. Pokemon.
The curtain falls. The music plays. The credits roll. Then it all fades to black. And you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day